The longships appeared at dawn on a Tuesday morning in the year 867 AD. The villagers of Lindisfarne had 20 minutes to live, and most of them didn't know it yet. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires, children played near the water, fishermen mended nets. And then someone shouted, a raw, terrified scream that cut through the morning calm. Every head turned toward the sea, and there they were, 6 dragon-headed ships slicing through the waves, oars beating in perfect rhythm, shields glinting along the sides. Vikings. The word itself was a death sentence. But 30 miles south, in a village so small it didn't even have a name on any map, an old woman named Hilda heard the church bells ringing the warning. And she did something no one expected. She smiled. This is not the story you've been told about Vikings. This is not about helpless victims and brutal conquerors. This is the true, forgotten account of how one tiny village used cunning, courage, and a strategy so brilliant that it saved every single life and sent the most feared raiders in Europe sailing away empty-handed and humiliated. And the lessons from that day, the tactics, the mindset, the sheer audacity, are lessons we desperately need to remember now. Welcome to English Mindset, where we uncover the stories history tried to bury, the moments that reveal what human beings are truly capable of when survival demands everything. Today, we step into a nameless coastal village in 9th century England, and we walk beside the people who refused to be victims. We will see what they saw, feel what they felt, and understand how they turned terror into triumph. If you've ever wondered what you would do when faced with overwhelming danger, stay with me. Because this story will challenge everything you think you know about power, fear, and survival. The Viking Age was the most violent period in medieval European history. From 793 to 1066, Norse raiders terrorized coastlines from Ireland to the Mediterranean. They struck without warning, burned villages, slaughtered men, enslaved women and children, and disappeared before any army could respond. Monasteries were favorite targets because they held treasure and had no soldiers. Towns with walls fared better, but small villages, undefended and isolated, were doomed. Or so everyone believed. But Hilda's village was different. Not because they were stronger, not because they were wealthier, but because they had something far more valuable than walls or weapons. They had a plan. And they had Hilda, a woman who had survived 3 Viking raids in her lifetime and learned something that no one else seemed to understand. Vikings were not invincible. They were predictable. When the warning bells rang, most villages panicked. People ran in every direction. Some tried to hide valuables. Some grabbed children and fled into the forests. Some stood frozen, unable to process the horror coming toward them. But Hilda had taught her village a different way. Years earlier, after the second raid, she gathered the elders and made them listen. She told them that fear was the Vikings' greatest weapon, more deadly than their axes. She told them that if they could control their fear, they could control the outcome. So they practiced, not with swords, but with deception. They rehearsed their plan over and over until every man, woman, and child knew exactly what to do. And when those church bells rang on that fateful morning, the plan went into motion like a choreographed dance. No one screamed, no one ran. They moved with purpose, with precision, with a calmness that would have seemed impossible to any outsider. The first thing they did was hide everything of value, not in the obvious places like cellars and barns, but in the one place the Vikings would never look, the graveyard. They dug shallow trenches between the graves and buried their silver, their tools, their seed grain. Then they covered the disturbed earth with stones and crosses, making it look undisturbed, sacred, taboo. Vikings were superstitious. They feared the Christian dead. Hilda knew this. The second thing they did was make the village look abandoned and worthless. They doused the cooking fires. They released the livestock into the woods. They smashed pottery and scattered straw to make it look like the village had already been raided and looted. They left a few broken objects in plain sight, just enough to suggest there was nothing left worth taking. The third and most dangerous part of the plan was the performance. Hilda and a handful of villagers, the oldest and the bravest, stayed behind. They dressed in rags. They smeared their faces with ash and dirt. And when the Vikings landed and marched into the village, they found what looked like a pitiful group of survivors picking through the ruins of an already destroyed settlement. The Viking leader, a man named Ivar, stepped forward. He was tall, scarred, brutal. His eyes scanned the village with the cold efficiency of a predator. He saw the scattered debris, the empty animal pens, the broken doors. He saw Hilda and the others, bent and trembling, offering no resistance, and he made a decision. This village had already been hit. There was nothing here. It wasn't worth the time. He barked an order in Old Norse, and his men turned back toward the ships. But Hilda wasn't done. She called out to Ivar in broken Norse, a language she had learned from traders. She told him that another group of raiders had come 2 days before, taken everything, and sailed north. She pointed up the coast. She even described their ships. It was a complete lie, but she sold it with the desperation of someone who had already lost everything. Ivar believed her. Or perhaps he simply didn't care enough to verify. Either way, he left. The longships disappeared over the horizon, and the moment they were gone, the village exploded into action. They retrieved their valuables. They rebuilt what had been staged as destruction. And they thanked God, and they thanked Hilda. If you're still watching, if this story has pulled you in, then let me ask you something. Would you have had the courage to stay behind and face those raiders? Would you have trusted the plan, or would fear have taken over? Leave a comment and tell me, because I want to know. What does it take to stand firm when everything inside you is screaming to run? Now, some historians will tell you this story is folklore, that there's no written record, that it's just a legend passed down through oral tradition. And they're right. There is no official chronicle. But the story survived for a reason. It was told by grandmothers to grandchildren, by village elders around fires, because it mattered. Because it proved that the weak are not always helpless, that intelligence can defeat strength, and that survival is not about who has the biggest sword, it's about who has the clearest mind. And if you think this story is just a relic of the past, think again. The principles Hilda used are timeless. She understood her enemy. She controlled the narrative. She used misdirection. She stayed calm under pressure. She turned weakness into an advantage. These are not medieval tactics. These are survival strategies that work in any era, in any crisis, against any threat. So what can we learn from Hilda and her nameless village? First, that fear is a choice. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. Hilda's people were terrified, but they did not let terror dictate their actions. They followed the plan. They trusted each other. They acted with discipline. Second, that preparation matters. Hilda didn't wait until the Vikings arrived to figure out what to do. She planned ahead. She rehearsed. She made sure everyone knew their role. When the moment came, there was no confusion, no hesitation. Preparation turns chaos into order. Third, that deception is not cowardice. Hilda did not fight the Vikings because she could not win that fight. Instead, she fought them with information, with perception, with psychology. She made them see what she wanted them to see, and in doing so she won without a single blade being drawn. Fourth, that community is survival. Hilda could not have done this alone. She needed every person in that village to play their part. The young, the old, the strong, the frail, everyone contributed, and because they worked together, they all survived. Before we end, I want you to think about something. We live in a world that celebrates individual heroes, lone warriors, people who win through sheer force or talent. But the truth is, most survival, most success, most meaningful achievement comes from collaboration, from trust, from people working together toward a common goal. Hilda understood that, and so should we. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that courage is not the absence of fear but the mastery of it, then do me a favor. Hit the like button. Not for me, but because stories like this deserve to be shared. They deserve to be remembered. And if you want to keep exploring the forgotten moments of history that still speak to us today, subscribe to English Mindset and turn on notifications. Because we are building something here. A community of people who believe that the past is not dead. It is alive. It is instructive. It is urgent. Thank you for walking through this story with me. Thank you for caring enough to listen, to think, to feel. If this video meant something to you, share it. If it challenged you, comment on it. And if you want to keep uncovering the truths that history has hidden, stay with us. I'll see you in the next one.